this is Demel Gonzalez of Heartwood Financial Services. Hey, thanks for joining us for another video. This one is on financial education. This is actually a three-part series on crypto assets, and this is part 2. So if you missed part 1, I encourage you to go back, check it out. It gives you a good baseline on what the crypto assets are all about. This one is to get to the crux of, are there any actual uses for crypto assets, or is it just purely for speculation? It certainly seems like that sometimes, doesn't it? So thanks for joining me. If this is the first time here, hey, welcome. Feel free to subscribe. You'll find out next time I have a video out. If you've been here before, thanks for coming back. Hit like, subscribe if you haven't subscribed. That way you'll know the first time these videos come out. But I appreciate you guys watching. I hope you enjoy. Okay, before we get into the nitty-gritty here, part 2, let's go ahead and do a quick recap of what blockchain is, because that is the essential technology that was created when Bitcoin and all these other crypto assets came to be. So if you remember from the part 1 video, which I recommend you go back to if you missed it or if it's been a while, the blockchain is basically a collection of all these computers that are out there that are verifying these cells that are on the internet of different transactions that take place, and every cell gets grouped together and create a block, and that's why it's called the blockchain. But these are basically, it's like a giant Excel spreadsheet in the digital world of transactions taking place, you know, who owes what, money transferred from one person to another person. That's like a digital ledger that's on the internet that's being verified and confirmed by these computers and getting paid in these cryptocurrencies. Again, the important thing to remember about blockchain is that it's very secure, it's completely digital, and it's completely decentralized. So that's probably the number one thing. It's decentralized, meaning there's not a bank or an investment company or somebody that controls this chain of information. It's really controlled by all these computers that are creating consensus. Okay, so this will be a very important point, as you'll see as we get into some of the applications of some of these technologies. Okay, let's talk about some of the practical potential uses for these crypto assets. Now, I'm going to split this conversation up really into 2 parts. When you look at the crypto asset universe, there's Bitcoin and there's basically everything else. I'm sure you've heard of maybe some of the others like Ethereum and Cardano and Solana and some of these, and there's almost like a new one every day. Some of them more interesting than others, but essentially there's Bitcoin and everything else. And so I'm going to start with Bitcoin here in this chart, and probably the number one use that comes up with Bitcoin is its store of value. And so what else is a store of value that we've known historically? Gold, right? And so I'm going to start with a comparison of Bitcoin and gold so that you can kind of see them side to side. And so of course both have been a store of value, although of course you could see that historically gold has a little leg up here on Bitcoin. It's been around a long time. It's got a track record that's been proven, and there's a lot of governments around the world that store it as a store of value. And Bitcoin isn't necessarily, well, let's just say it's not there yet. They're trying to make their case. Censor resistant. This is interesting. Back in the 1930s, some of you might know that FDR actually confiscated a lot of the gold that was in the United States through basically through an executive order. And so there's always this concern that gold could be confiscated or censored or something like that, where Bitcoin, because it's a decentralized system of money, it's hard to really control it by any entity or any government. And so you can say that maybe it has a little bit more resistance there. So that's a check for Bitcoin. Limited supply, of course, we've talked about how Bitcoin only has 21 million in supply, and that's a finite amount that's written into the programming code and can't be changed. Gold definitely has a finite supply, but they do find new gold here and there. And who knows, maybe we'll be mining asteroids someday and there'll be tons of gold up there. So there's a potential for that to maybe get eroded over time. Market cap, gold definitely has a leg up on Bitcoin. There's a lot more money in gold than in Bitcoin. Although there was a very interesting article by Goldman Sachs that talked about Bitcoin is actually catching up. It's about 20% of the store of value assets, and essentially the rest, of course, being gold. And they think that maybe it could even come to par with gold at 50-50. Of course, that would be a pretty big move up in the value of Bitcoin to do that. So that's a pretty bold call. I don't know. We'll have to see. But that I would give both of those a good check, since Bitcoin is now about $1 trillion market. Lower cost. I would say we're talking here about transactions. So if you want to send money to one person or another, imagine doing that in gold. It's even more difficult actually. So Bitcoin is actually a little bit better in this respect, that it's very low cost to send money across the country or even to the other side of the world. And then of course the decentralization of Bitcoin versus gold. Bitcoin has an advantage here too. There are a lot of governments that control the supply of gold in their countries. There's big institutions that have a lot of gold. The miners have a lot of say in the gold prices, etc. So it can be a little bit more susceptible to manipulation, where Bitcoin is a little harder to manipulate. But of course, anything could potentially be manipulated. But you can see that there are some potential store of value and transaction applications to Bitcoin. All right, you probably heard enough about Bitcoin. Let's get to the everything else. And the number one everything else is what's called Ethereum. Ethereum kind of took Bitcoin to the next level. Okay, instead of just putting a transaction in this blockchain system, they actually created a program. It's a program or a smart contract, okay, in the blockchain. And a smart contract is basically like a little program. It could be, if you pay me X amount, then I will give you my house. It's a contract. And so it's, in a way, it's a programmable money. And so this can also be put into the blockchain type system. And so Ethereum, again, has its own coins and everything. It's created this whole universe. It's kind of like the Apple app system, where you have all these developers that can use the Apple app system to create applications. And so that's what the Ethereum network has become. And some of the things that have come from this Ethereum network and other networks similar to Ethereum's, I'm going to list out here. But the first one I have here is NFTs and tokenization. Some of you might have heard of NFTs. I don't know if there's a lot of practical uses right now for NFTs, but basically they're like certificates of authenticity in the digital world. Some people think that it's pretty helpful right now if you're an artist and maybe your art is on the internet versus real art. But in that case, it can potentially have some uses. So maybe more down the road, as we get more and more digital in the worlds that we live in, I could see NFTs having more of a use. But tokenization in general, I think, is actually a very interesting concept, because what they're doing is they're converting real life things into digital things. So for example, imagine you own a building. You can actually tokenize your building and split it up into little bits and pieces. And the reason you may want to do this is that you can then sell those little bits and pieces to raise money for buying another piece of property, or maybe you want to renovate the property. It's a way that you can avoid having to go to banks or having to do initial public offering and paying bankers and investment bankers lots of money. You cut out a lot of middlemen. And so you'll see this decentralized system is actually helping things become a little bit more efficient, lower cost, and accessible to more people. So that's tokenization. Now, stay tuned. I got some more here that we're going to talk about. Now, this is certainly not an exhaustive list, but I just wanted to name a few more things that are potential uses, and a lot of it comes from the decentralization aspect of this blockchain technology. And another thing that has developed, and I talked about it a little bit with the tokenization, but is decentralized finance. So you may have heard of this term. It's called DeFi. And this is where anywhere where you see that there is a big institution that governs a lot of things, like banks, insurance companies, real estate companies, medical companies, anything where there's a centralized amount of information that can be governed and manipulated by a small group of people, have potential for some disruption with this type of technology, including finance. So there's a lot of different aspects to this DeFi. I encourage you to take a look at it. Now, Web 3.0, you may have heard of this term. They're talking about also decentralizing the internet. Okay, I admit I still don't completely understand most of the aspects of this, but if you think about it, you know, Google, Apple, Facebook, they do control a lot of the internet. So they're talking about maybe trying to take away some of that power and decentralizing the internet. Now that sounds like a wonderful idea. I guess I'll believe it when I see it, kind of thing. But again, this is because of blockchain that they have the potential to be able to do something like this. Here's some other interesting applications: securing sharing of medical data, personal identity security, voting. Imagine if there's a way to decentralize that and make it more secure. That would be of interest. Supply chain and logistics monitoring. Think about UPS and all these companies that use supply chains and have to ship things and have to monitor things. And so this could really add value to a lot of those different industries potentially. Now, some of these things are starting to get used in industry today and are finding some uses. So it seems like to me that the uses for these crypto assets are very helpful and could potentially revolutionize a lot of different aspects of the things that we do today. So I would challenge you to say, you know what, there might be something to this technology. Which ones win, which ones lose? I got a feeling a lot of them will lose. Some of them may win. It's hard to know. But the purpose of this video is to really just to kind of open up your eyes a little bit to the potential for these technologies. This is something that I'm learning more about, and I just wanted to share some of this with you as well. So I'm still learning. By no means is this all the information out there, and I'm not saying go out there and buy crypto assets. So I'm not recommending that. I am just recommending exploring, educating, and learning more about something that's new out there and very interesting. Thanks a lot for watching. I hope this was helpful.